All right, Dad, you told me an interesting story leading up to this episode. You said you wanted to talk about your time as a firefighter, and I don't remember if you've ever told me this story before, but you wanted to tell Ezra.
Yeah, I probably haven't told you a lot of these. Um, I spent 7 years in fire department, crash rescue, extinguisher maintenance, fire protection inspector. Um, but it was the first part of my career, which was long, long time ago, starting in 1965. And then I moved into the real estate cost accounting field after the 7 years. But there was a story at Luke Air Force Base that was kind of unique, and we talked briefly about um, probably where I should have died. This is one of those stories. I have I have a lot of fire department stories, really, but this one was I was close to death and never even moved when this accident happened. This was in the late 1960s, and the Air Force was flying F-100 airplanes or fighters, and they were just being phased out. And I think the F-106s were coming in, F-104s were around the corner. So this was an old airplane, the F-100. Um, the Thunderbirds, which is the Air Force demonstration team, were flying these F-100s at the time, and they were going to switch over. But I just don't remember exactly what plane they were switching to. But the 100 was around for a long time, very dependable, and very few issues with it. But we were standing in front of the fire station, myself and a couple other friends who were in the fire department. And we were just talking and we were watching the airplanes. They were about maybe 200 yards away from the ramp and maybe 300 yards from the runway. And we got a call that there was an emergency coming in. It was an F-100. And the pilot said that the engine was on fire. You could hear all of this because the station communications folks would broadcast this, and you could hear it all through the fire station, outside the fire station. And so we never moved. We just stood there. But there's a runway truck that sits out on the runway in case there's a fire on the runway. It's right there. So you have to go out there and sit for maybe 3-4 hours at a time. And then another crew would come and relieve you. Well, I wasn't there. I was inside the station, and I was the driver of a CO2 truck. CO2 is a fire suppressant that's still around. They have the little tanks. You could buy them. You use them in your kitchen. They're used for electrical fires. Well, for airplane fires, you don't throw water on it. You throw foam or you use CO2. So I was the driver for the CO2 truck that sit outside the station because to keep the CO2 cold, you had to plug it into this special device. It's like a freezer and it keeps the truck cold. So everybody else was running to their truck, and we were just kind of waiting to see what was going on because all the foam vehicles, they normally go first and the CO2 truck goes. At that time, actually, the CO2, they were getting rid of that in the Air Force. They were changing to other vehicles, and CO2 was no longer a great firefighting, effort. So my friends and I were just standing in front and we're watching all of this, and you saw the plane come in and he crashed. And so we're standing there, and now we're like, okay, all the other trucks are gone out, and we look, and the trucks are going down one ramp. Well, this airplane was coming up another, and he was coming right at us. So remember, it's about 300 yards from the runway. So I don't know why we just stood there, but we all just stood there. It's in disbelief, for one thing. The second thing is you would never think that this airplane would cartwheel all the way up to the fire station. And that's what it did. It went almost 300 yards and it was coming right at us. Well, now we're ready to move. We see it's getting close. probably about 100 yards. We said, okay, we better jump in our truck. They may need us. So we started back at the truck. Well, this thing is coming fast. When I turned around and looked, the plane had stopped maybe 50 yards from maybe 75 yards from the fire station, and it stopped. And you could see the pilot, and the plane was sitting, the nose was on the ground, the back end was up, and it was on fire. Remember, all the other trucks went the other way. So now they're turning around, coming back. So we have our CO2 truck. And so when we saw the pilot, okay, let's get in the truck. So I'm watching as this thing is happening. I'm running to the truck. I'm getting in a truck. You know, you had to disconnect it and all of that. And we start out to the plane. So what I saw was the pilot opened up the cockpit. He was still alive, and when he opened up the cockpit, the the air that came through the cockpit just engulfed the flames, or the flames engulfed the oxygen, because that's what fires need, is oxygen. The CO2 would actually smother oxygen. That's all it did. The foam would too, but the foam would, neither one of them would last a long time. And when these planes are burning, they have magnesium, and magnesium could burn for weeks, even after you put out the fire. It's still burning. So I'm in a truck. I'm looking at this guy, and he's trying to get out, and he just, you could see he took his mask off, and then blood came out of his mouth, and he just dropped his head, and that was it. So the guys went in, and they were still trying to rescue him, and I controlled the boom with the CO2, and so I sprayed the plane, and they could get in there, and they went in, and they had to cut him out because the fire had melted his suit and to his skin, and so they cut him out and they pulled him out, but he was already dead. But that was probably one of the scarier moments. And then maybe 10 minutes later, the other trucks were in, they were throwing foam. The plane blows up again. It just, because of the heat and everything, all the fuel, it blew up. But with the foam and the CO2 and all of that, it helped to cool some of that so it didn't burn as much. But that was probably one of the scariest moments, and kind of one of the dumbest things to do was to just stand there and watch. I mean, we probably should have went to our truck. Well, actually, one or two of the guys did go to the truck, and they put on their bunker suits, and I sent you a picture of the bunkers, and you know what they look like. Um, but they were putting those all on. But even as the driver, you have to put your bunker suit on. But you could get in your bunker suit in less than 20 seconds because you were trained to do that. Your boots were sitting down, and your bunker suits were folded over. So you jump into your boots and then pull your pants up and then put your coat on. And the guys that have to fight the fire, they have to put their hood on. So these guys were back at the truck, and they were doing that. But none of us realized that, this thing would come up so far, and we were all just kind of stuck. It's like we couldn't believe this was happening. And it was just going in cartwheels. It rolled all the way up until it got to the front of the station. And that was kind of scary. And like I said, I've got a lot of stories about being in the fire department. And that one was just a dumb one, because when you see an airplane coming at you and it's on fire and it's tumbling all the way down the ramp, run, Forrest, run.